They brought Isabet Rook before the Alpha King to burn the lies out of eyes that had never seen the court. No one wondered what false sight Silver would do when it found no sight of her own to punish. A punishment made for stolen vision had no mercy for honest darkness. That was the cruelty of it. The night-glass hall had been built for wolves with perfect sight. Black stone pillars rose like frozen tree trunks beneath a roof of silver glass, and moonlight fell through the ceiling in long pale blades. Every noble pack house of Greymere stood in attendance, dressed in wolf fur mantles, bone clasps, and polished silver. Their eyes watched everything: her torn hem, her bare feet, the white cloth tied across her eyes. The way she counted the steps by sound, because the royal guards walked too quickly for a blind woman and too slowly for a prisoner. At the far end of the hall, Alpha King Kaedric Vorn sat on the black wolf throne. Isabet did not see him. She heard him, not his breath. He held that too well, not his armor. Kings trained their bodies not to betray metal. She heard the silence around him, the strange hollow place where an alpha's inner wolf should have pressed against the room. Absence had a sound if a person had lived long enough in darkness to hear where watching should have been. Every royal wolf carried a second presence, and royal wolf sight was not vision, it was judgment. A king could lose sight and still see. A king who lost judgment could be led anywhere. Even when unseen, it made the air feel watched. Kaedric's did not. That absence frightened her more than the court's laughter. High Visioner Maelra stood beside the throne in pale silver robes, her long white hair pinned with tiny moonbones. In one hand, she held a shallow black bowl filled with melted false sight silver. In the other, a crescent branding wand so thin it looked almost harmless. Almost. Isabet Rook Maelra announced, her voice smooth enough to make cruelty sound ceremonial, daughter of no sighthouse, oathless speaker of forbidden visions, accused of deceiving royal judgment through fabricated prophecy. The nobles murmured because they liked the word fabricated. It allowed them to enjoy the punishment without fearing the vision. Isabet stood at the center of the moon circle and kept her chin lifted. Her hands were bound in front of her with soft white cord. Soft because bruises looked untidy during sacred judgment. Her dress was plain charcoal wool patched at both elbows and torn where the guards had dragged her from the lower shrine. She had been kept there for 7 years, allowed to speak only when noble families wanted warnings, cheaply and quietly. When her visions saved a child from a frozen river, they called it useful. When she warned that the king's report smelled of dead ink and traitor hands, they called it fraud. That was how truth died in Greymere. Not by being disproved, by becoming inconvenient to someone wearing authority. Maelra turned toward the throne. Your Majesty, the accused claimed 3 nights ago that the Western battle report was false. She said the dead messenger did not die on the road, but inside a sealed council chamber. She also claimed your wolf had been denied sight, denied, not lost. Isabet had used that word because loss wandered. Denial had a hand, and hands left residue even when courts called it ritual. The hall went still. Isabet felt the silence tighten around Kaedric like a chain pulled through a ring. Then the Alpha King spoke. Did she name who denied it? His voice was deep, controlled, and colder than moonlit steel. It carried through the hall without effort. Isabet understood at once why Pax obeyed him. Kaedric Vorn did not need to shout. His restraint was its own threat. Maelra lowered her head. She named no proof, only shadows. Shadows are what blind women are expected to know, someone whispered from the left. Laughter followed, brief and sharp. Isabet's fingers curled against the cord. She had learned long ago not to defend herself against every insult. A person could bleed dry from answering small cuts. Instead, she listened. A woman near the southern pillar shifted her weight 3 times. Nervous. A male counselor's silver chain clicked against his collarbone too fast for calm. Maelra's breathing remained measured, but her sleeve brushed the bowl in tiny movements as if she wanted the branding done before the king asked another question. Kaedric did not ask another question. That silence would belong to him later. That hurt more than Isabet expected. She did not know him. She had no right to hope the most feared alpha in Greymere would believe a blind shrine girl over his own court. But some foolish part of her had thought a king with a silent wolf might hear another silence when it stood in front of him. Maelra lifted the crescent wand. False sight silver does not punish blindness, she said for the court. It punishes stolen vision. Then let it find what sight I stole, Isabet thought. I have none. If her prophecies are true, the silver will cool. If she has forged sight to poison royal trust, it will burn across her eyes and mark her as false before every pack. Isabet swallowed. Her world was already dark. But pain did not need light to find a body. A guard stepped behind her and untied the white cloth from her face. The court inhaled softly, not with pity but with fascination. Isabet knew what they saw. Eyes pale gray and unfocused. Lashes dark against skin, too colorless, from years below moonstone. No noble mark at the brow, no sighthouse tattoo, no proof that anything sacred had ever touched her. Maelra approached. Last chance, the High Visioner murmured too softly for the hall. Admit you guessed. Admit grief made you hungry for importance. The court may leave you your tongue. Isabet turned her face toward the voice. You are afraid of what I saw. Maelra smiled. Isabet could hear it in the shape of her breath. No, child. I am afraid of what others may believe. The crescent wand touched the melted silver. The bowl hissed. Kaedric's gauntleted hand tightened once on the arm of the throne. Isabet heard that too. Maelra pressed the wand across Isabet's closed eyes. Pain exploded in white. She did not scream at first. Her body forgot how. The false sight silver burned from one temple to the other in a crescent line. The silver searched for stolen sight and found only sealed darkness. So it followed the nearest sealed sight, still tied to royal judgment. The hall blurred into sound, a few satisfied breaths, one stifled gasp, a wolf growl from somewhere near the throne. Not Kaedric, something behind him, something vast. Isabet fell to her knees. The silver should have settled black if she was false. That was how Maelra had explained it to the court. A liar's mark stayed dark proof that stolen vision had been burned away. But the brand across Isabet's eyes did not turn black. It turned silver white. Then it opened. Not her eyes, not a cure, a passage. The wound did not make Isabet whole. It made Varok heard. Moonlight poured through the crescent brand as if someone had cut a window in the dark. Isabet's body froze. For the first time in her life, she saw nothing with her own sight, but something else looked through her. A wolf. Huge. Black as storm shadow, bound in chains of pale writing. Its eyes had been covered by silver script sealed shut beneath court magic. The wolf lifted its head behind the Alpha King. Kaedric stood so violently that the throne struck the wall behind him. Every wolf in the hall dropped silent. Isabet's burned mark blazed brighter, and the spectral black wolf turned its blinded face toward her, as if it had been waiting years for someone else's darkness to become a doorway. Then the Alpha King whispered not to the court, not to Maelra, but to the wolf he could no longer see. Varok. The wolf's sealed eyes opened through Isabet's branded ones. Varok was not giving her sight. He was using the wound Maelra had made to look back. And looking back was not the same as being free. And the first thing it saw was Maelra's hand still dripping false sight silver. Sight seal recognized. False sight source retained. Royal wolf vision contested. But contested sight was not restored judgment. Not yet. Isabet did not see the court. Varok did. And judgment, once borrowed through pain, still had to fight for standing. The difference mattered. Her own world remained dark beneath the crescent brand burned across her eyes. The silver had not healed her blindness. It had not opened some hidden gift, like a noble story, meant to make pain beautiful. Isabet was still on her knees, in the moon circle, wrists bound with soft white cord skin burning from temple to temple, breath breaking against her teeth because false sight silver did not become gentle just because it had failed to prove her false. But through the wound, Maelra had made something looked out. Varok. The Alpha King's inner wolf stood behind Kaedric like a storm-given shape, black fur rippling in spectral darkness, his sealed eyes now open through the silver-white passage across Isabet's face. He did not see with kindness. Royal wolf sight was judgment. And when it returned through a condemned brand, even the nobles who had laughed a moment before stepped back from the moon circle. Maelra withdrew her hand from the bowl. Slowly. False sight silver still dripped from her fingers onto the black stone floor. One drop, then another. Each drop hissed as if the stone itself knew the silver had been caught too close to its source. Borrowed wolf sight has no standing when carried through a condemned brand, Maelra said. Maelra said condemned as if she had not made the wound herself. Her voice carried cleanly through the hall. Not panic. Doctrine. The old shield of people who knew how to dress fear as law. The court clung to it at once. A few counselors breathed again. A noblewoman near the southern pillars whispered, borrowed sight, as if repeating the phrase could make the impossible smaller. Isabet bowed forward, one hand catching herself against the cold floor. The brand kept burning. Not her eyes, the mark. A passage could still be a wound, and wounds did not close because courts disliked what came through them. Kaedric had not moved since whispering Varok's name. He stood before the black wolf throne, his face carved into stillness, but his hand was no longer on the armrest. His fingers hung at his side, half-curled, as if he had reached for something inside himself and found distance instead. What sealed his eyes, he asked. Maelra turned toward him. Majesty, the phenomenon is unstable. It should be contained before the accused uses your wolf's image to deepen the fraud. Kaedric's gaze did not leave Isabet. I asked what sealed his eyes. The brand across Isabet's face flared. Behind him, Varok's great head lowered. Silver script still clung around the wolf's eyes like chains made of written moonlight. Some symbols had cracked open, but not enough. Judgment had contested the binding. It had not restored itself. Not yet. Isabet pressed her bound hands to the floor and forced herself to breathe. The silver searched for sources. It had found sealed royal wolf sight because there was no stolen sight in her to punish. If it could contest the seal, it could read the edge of it. Maybe. Or maybe it would burn through her skull trying. She lifted her face toward the place where Kaedric's voice had stood. Read what sealed his eyes. The court went cold. Maelra stepped forward at once. No accused prophet may compel royal sight testimony. I am not compelling him, Isabet whispered. Her voice shook, but it did not break. I am asking the silver what it touched. False sight silver could ignore pity. It could not ignore contact. The false sight mark opened wider. Pain struck so hard that Isabet's hand slipped on the stone. She nearly fell fully forward, but a growl rolled through the hall, low and terrible. Not Kaedric's voice, Varok's. The sound moved through Isabet's brand, like thunder passing through a narrow cave. The silver answered. Royal wolf sight denied. Silver script applied. Battle report accepted. Inner judgment blinded. The sequence did not name accident. It named procedure. The words did not appear to Isabet. She could not see them, but she heard the court read them in broken breaths, heard one scribe drop his stylus, heard Kaedric inhale as if the line had entered his ribs. Battle report accepted. Kaedric turned slowly toward Maelra. The Western report, he said. Maelra bowed her head. An emergency court site restriction was placed to protect royal judgment during wartime confusion. Protect it from what? Foreign manipulation. Grief distortion. Wolf instinct contamination. Varok's spectral body shuddered behind him. The silver script over the wolf's eyes tightened. Isabet cried out before she could stop herself. The brand burned hotter as if the seal had felt Maelra's explanation and tried to close around Varok again. Kaedric saw the pain cross her face. This time he did not look away. I let them burn her, he said, voice low enough that the court had to grow silent to hear it before I asked what my wolf could not see. The admission did not cool the brand. Isabet felt that too. No one answered. Maelra's expression remained composed, but the silver dripping from her hand slowed. Your Majesty, she said, regret is not evidence. No, Kaedric said, but the seal is. He stepped down from the throne platform. Isabet felt the movement in the floor before she heard his boots. The court shifted around him, alarmed that the Alpha King would approach a condemned prophetess still carrying contested royal sight through a brand. Varok moved with him, but not freely. The wolf's head jerked, once caught by the silver script, still wrapped over his eyes. The brand across Isabet's face flashed again, and a new line of fire crawled along the edge of the crescent mark, searching deeper into the seal. Maelra lifted the crescent wand. The ritual must be closed. Kaedric stopped. Do not touch her. She is the open wound through which your wolf is being misused. Isabet laughed, once broken and breathless. No, I am the wound your silver made. The brand flared as if the silver recognized its own blame. The brand burned silver white. Varok's sealed eyes turned toward Maelra's dripping hand again. A new thread of script began to loosen from his left eye, thin as moon hair, carrying the shape of the one who had held the seal in place. Maelra's face changed, only for a moment, but Isabet heard it in her breath. Fear. The falsite silver began to read the seal holder. But naming the hand would not restore Varok. It would only prove who had held his darkness in place. Varok had not gone silent because Kaedric's wolf was weak. He had been blinded before the false battle report reached the throne. Varok's sight returned only far enough to accuse, not far enough to free him. Accusation was not freedom. It was only the first crack in the seal. The spectral black wolf stood behind Kaedric with his head lowered and his shoulders tense, as if every inch of sight had to be dragged through chains. Silver script still clung over his eyes in broken bands. One crack had opened through the seal, enough for royal wolf judgment to look through Isabet's branded wound, but not enough for Varok to see as he once had. Not enough to stand beside his king as whole judgment. Not enough to break free of the hand that had held his darkness in place. Isabet remained on her knees. Her world was still black. The crescent brand across her eyes burned silver white, but it did not give her sight. It gave passage. It gave pain. It gave Varok a narrow way to look back through the wound Maelra had made. The court could see the wolf's judgment reflected through her face, but Isabet herself saw nothing. That was what made the court uneasy. They could not accuse her of seeing what she still did not possess. She felt the cold stone under her palms, the soft cord around her wrists, the heat crawling from temple to temple, and the terrible attention of a room that had wanted her false until she became useful to truth. Maelra Sen recovered her voice first. A seal holder is not a criminal, she said. It is a custodian of court sight. Custody, Isabet knew, was only a gentler word for holding something that wanted to return. The phrase steadied several nobles at once. Custodian sounded clean. It sounded necessary. It turned a hand on a wolf's blindness into a hand guarding the throne. Kaedric did not sit again. He stood at the edge of the throne platform, one step lower than before, his body still as drawn steel. Custody. Over my wolf's eyes. Custody over unstable judgment during wartime uncertainty, Maelra answered. Royal wolf sight is powerful, Majesty, but power without court interpretation can be misled. A seal holder preserves the realm until the threat passes. Isabet's burned mouth parted. The threat passed, she whispered, but the seal stayed. And a seal that stayed after danger ended was no longer protection. It was possession. The brand flared. Varok's great head turned toward her, not in choice, not in devotion, but in recognition of the shape of the words. The wolf was not choosing Isabet. He was following the only opening his blinded judgment had found. Isabet lifted her face toward the dripping silver she could hear striking the stone. Read the hand that held the seal. Maelra moved at once. No condemned brand may interrogate a Visioner's custody record. False sight silver answered before Kaedric could. Sealholder entered. Visioner hand retained. Council chamber sealed. Battle report carried. The silver had named the hand. It had not yet named the voice behind it. The words traveled through the hall in silver heat. Isabet did not see them, but she heard the change in breathing. The court did not react like people hearing wild magic. They reacted like officials hearing a record name, a document they had hoped stayed locked. Visioner hand retained. Maelra's hand. She did not deny it. That was what made her dangerous. I held the seal under emergency courtsight doctrine, she said. The western border was unstable. The messenger carried a report that could have split command. The council chamber was sealed to protect the throne from panic until the information could be verified. Kaedric's face changed at the word verified, not softened, cut deeper. If court sight could blind my wolf before a report reached me, he said, each word controlled, then every judgment I made after that carried someone else's eyes. The admission did not clear him. It made every sentence after the report heavier. The hall had no answer ready for that. Isabet did not comfort him. She could hear the wound in his voice, but her own brand still burned because he had let Maelra press silver across her eyes before he questioned the silence inside himself. His regret was real. It was not payment. The silver script over Varok's eyes tightened again, as if the seal understood it had been named too closely. Isabet gasped and bent forward. Pain scattered white through her darkness. Varok's growl moved through her brand, low and broken, trying to push against the script without tearing the passage apart. Maelra lifted the crescent wand. The ritual must be closed before the accused collapses and contaminates the reading. Kaedric's voice struck before her hand moved another inch. Do not touch Isabet Rook. Maelra stopped. For the first time, he used her full name. The brand did not cool. Isabet felt that too. Names mattered, but they did not undo burns. Isabet felt that truth more sharply than his protection. Maelra lowered the wand only slightly. Majesty, if the passage remains open, your wolf's compromised sight may continue to answer through a condemned body. That is a direct threat to court order. No, Isabet said, breathless against the stone. It is a threat to court hiding. The silver-white brand sharpened. A thin thread of script slipped from Varok's left eye and stretched toward the place where Maelra stood. Then it veered away from her hand and pulled toward the western wall of the night-glass hall, where the council doors stood sealed with old moon iron. Isabet felt the direction through heat, not sight. It is not stopping at her hand, she whispered. Kaedric turned toward the council doors. Maelra's composure hardened. Some records are sealed for the survival of the crown. Isabet's fingers pressed into the floor, then read who ordered it. The brand burned so hot that her breath failed. Varok lunged against his own silver script, not forward in the hall, but inward against the seal still wrapped around his sight. One more line loosened thin as a cut in moonlight. The false sight silver did not open the whole conspiracy. It opened one path, one hand, one chamber, one report. The hand that held Varok's sight seal was Maelra's, but the order to blind him had entered from the sealed council chamber before the messenger was declared dead. And the messenger's death, Isabet realized, had been timed to make the false report arrive alone. Varok's sight did not widen after naming Maelra. It narrowed toward the chamber that had ordered him blind. The spectral black wolf remained behind Kaedric with silver script, still gripping his eyes in broken rings. One slit of royal judgment looked through Isabet's burning brand, but the rest of him was caught in darkness. He could accuse. He could follow the thread. He could not yet stand free beside his king. Every time he tried to push deeper into the sealed path, the script tightened and dragged his head lower. Isabet felt that tightening through the crescent wound across her face. She was still on her knees in the moon circle, still blind, still bound. Her palms pressed against cold stone, and her breath trembled in the small space between pain and collapse. The court saw the silver-white glow across her eyes and feared the truth coming through her. But Isabet saw nothing. The passage had opened in her wound, not in her sight. The thin silver thread that had left Maelra's hand pulled toward the sealed council doors on the western wall of the night-glass hall. The doors were high black and ringed with old moon iron. No noble had looked at them when Isabet was dragged in. Now no one could stop looking. Maelra Sen stepped in front of the thread. Council voices sealed during wartime cannot be compelled through condemned sight. Her words were calm, but the thread did not stop. It curved around her shoulder and trembled toward the doors. Kaedric's gaze followed it. Condemned sight, he said very softly. You still call it that after your silver opened my wolf's seal. Maelra turned her face toward him. Because the vessel remains condemned, Majesty. A brand does not gain standing because unstable magic speaks through it. Isabet lifted her head toward the council doors. Then read the council voice. The silver thread snapped tight. Pain broke through her so sharply that her arms nearly failed. Varok growled, not in rage but in strain. His partial sight pressed through her brand like a wolf, trying to see through a crack in frozen water. The silver script around his eyes resisted, curling inward, trying to drag the thread back into silence. Kaedric stepped forward. Maelra lifted the crescent wand. Close the ritual now, or the accused will break under royal sight pressure. Do not touch her, Kaedric said. The words stopped the guards before they moved, but they did not stop the pain. Isabet knew the difference. Protection could hold back hands. It could not undo what had already been burned into her skin. The false sight silver read, council order entered, wolf sight restricted, messenger detained, report corrected before delivery. The hall seemed to lose its breath. Report corrected. Not received. Not mistaken. Corrected. Kaedric stared at the silver line as if it had opened beneath his feet. The report was changed before it reached me. Maelra's answer came too quickly. The council corrected panic before it reached the throne. Panic, Isabet whispered. The brand pulsed. Varok's partial sight turned toward her for one breath, not giving her vision, only recognizing the word as something false dressed cleanly. Maelra's voice sharpened. The Western messenger carried battlefield confusion. Unfiltered reports can collapse command. Council review exists to protect royal authority from chaos. Kaedric's jaw tightened. You blinded my wolf so I would accept the review. We restricted compromised instinct so the throne could receive stable information. If I judged through their sight, Kaedric said, then I still gave their lies my sentence. No one in the hall moved. Isabet did not comfort him. He was not clean because he had been guided. His seal had still closed orders. His voice had still made sentences final. His wolf had been blinded, yes, but his throne had carried the result into blood and exile and ash. The truth did not absolve him. It only showed how far his responsibility had been made to travel without judgment beside it. The silver thread pulled harder toward the council doors. Varok tried to follow. His spectral body lunged one step, and the broken script around his eyes snapped tight. Isabet cried out and bent forward her forehead, almost touching the stone. The brand burned hotter, not widening, not healing, only holding the passage open long enough for the next layer to answer. Kaedric took another step toward her, then stopped himself. If he closed the brand, the evidence would disappear. If he left it open, Isabet would keep suffering. The choice stood between them like a blade. Isabet, he said, voice rougher than before. She breathed through her teeth. Do not make my pain noble. He went still. Read it, she whispered, before they call it panic again. The thread struck the council doors. Moon iron rings flared silver white. Behind the sealed wood, a muffled echo answered voices layered over one another, not clear enough to name not yet. The false sight silver did not open the full chamber. It opened one more path into the timing. Messenger entered palace alive. Council chamber sealed. Wolf sight restricted. Report corrected. Death record prepared after correction. A sound moved through the nobles, small and horrified. Kaedric turned slowly toward Maelra. He was alive. Maelra's face did not change. For questioning, for rewriting, for protecting the throne from a report that could have fractured the Western Pax, Isabet's fingers curled against the stone. The brand burned so fiercely now that tears slipped from beneath the silver crescent, though no sight came with them. Varok's growl deepened through her wound. The silver thread opened the final line. The Western messenger had not died before reaching the palace. He had been kept alive long enough for the council to rewrite what Kaedric would be allowed to see. A living messenger made the corrected report less sacred. The silver thread remained stretched against the sealed council doors, humming with the last line it had opened. The Western messenger had entered the palace alive. The report had been changed while he still breathed. His death record had come after the correction, not before. The court did not move because no one wanted to be seen understanding too quickly. Isabet stayed on her knees in the moon circle. Her hands shook against the stone. The brand across her eyes burned so fiercely that every breath felt pulled through heated wire, but her darkness remained untouched. She did not see the council doors. She did not see Kaedric's face. She did not see Maelra's silver robes or the crescent wand in her hand. She only felt Varok's partial sight straining through her wound, narrow and furious, still trapped by the script wrapped around his eyes. Maelra Sen spoke before the silence could turn against her. A messenger under wartime detention does not carry standing until his testimony is purified by council review. Kaedric's voice came low. Purified. Corrected, Maelra said. Stabilized. A border report can carry fear, confusion, grief pack, loyalty, and enemy pressure. The council exists so the throne receives judgment, not panic. Isabet lifted her head slightly, then read what they corrected. The silver thread shivered. Maelra turned toward her. A condemned prophetess cannot compel sealed report contents through a brand of false sight. The brand flared hotter. Isabet swallowed the sound rising in her throat. You keep saying condemned because you need the wound to belong to me. The words came out faint, but the silver heard them. Kaedric did too. He stepped closer to the moon circle, then stopped at its edge. The restraint had become sharper in him now, almost painful to hear. His boots halted before the old silver line in the floor. He knew crossing it by force might drive the ritual deeper into her skin. He knew not crossing it left her kneeling alone inside the pain he had allowed. Read the original report, he said. The silver resisted. Varok's spectral body bowed under the weight of the script, and Isabet's fingers scraped against the stone. Kaedric's command had authority, but authority had been used to accept the corrected report. The brand did not know whether his voice was opening the truth or repeating the old path. Isabet spoke before the seal could tighten further. Not by crown command, she whispered, by contact. The silver touched the correction. Make it follow the change backward. The thread went still. Then it moved. False sight silver could punish sight. It could test sources. It could follow residue. It slid from the council doors down toward the floor, tracing an invisible line from the sealed chamber back to the place where the messenger's report had first been opened. The silver read. Original report entered. Western Pax held position. Mercy order requested. Treason wording inserted. Alpha sentence prepared. The words struck Kaedric harder than any howl could have. Isabet heard it in his breath. Not surprise alone. Memory. Maelra's voice sharpened. The Western Pax held position after violating movement command. Treason wording was appropriate under border law. Kaedric did not answer her at once. His silence changed. It was no longer the silence of a king who had been blind to his wolf. It was the silence of a man finding his own hand on a sentence he could no longer pretend began elsewhere. Mercy order requested, he said. The silver thread pulsed. Varok's growl moved through Isabet's brand, broken but clear. Kaedric's voice lowered. I remember signing a punishment order for the Western houses after that report. Maelra bowed her head. Because the report established refusal delay and probable enemy sympathy. The original report asked for mercy. The original report asked for uncertainty. Isabet's burned lips parted. No, it asked for judgment before punishment. The brand flashed at judgment. Varok's partial sight pressed forward, and a narrow image opened in the silver thread. Isabet did not see it, but the hall did. The Western messenger, exhausted and still alive, stood inside a sealed chamber with blood-dark mud on his boots and a torn wolf banner under one arm. His mouth moved around a sentence that the silver carried into sound. The Western Pax held the pass until the crown's wounded crossed. The image shifted. A council scribe scraped the line from the report with a silver blade. Another hand wrote refusal to advance. A third hand added suspected enemy sympathy. The messenger tried to speak again, but moon iron bands closed around his wrists. The image ended before his death. It did not need to show more. Kaedric's hands curled at his sides. I sentenced loyal Pax for delay after they held the pass for my wounded. Maelra's face remained composed, but her fingers tightened around the crescent wand. You sentenced instability. A king cannot rule by every witness who claims loyalty after disobedience. If I judged through their sight, Kaedric said, then I still gave their lies my sentence. Isabet did not comfort him. The sentence mattered because it did not excuse him. It kept him inside the harm. His wolf had been blinded. His reports had been rewritten, but his name had still made the punishment law. The silver thread pulled one more time toward the council doors. Maelra moved as if to step between it and the sealed chamber. Kaedric's voice cut across the hall. Stand aside. Majesty, if you force sealed council memory open, every Western judgment made after that report will become contestable. Then they should be. The court shifted, not in loyalty, in fear of records. Isabet bent lower, nearly collapsing as the brand widened by a fraction. Varok tried to see deeper, and the script over his eyes tightened until the silver-white passage trembled. He was still not free. His sight could follow the correction, but not yet break the chamber that ordered it. The false sight silver read one final line. The original report had carried Kaedric's own mercy command for the Western Pax, and the council had rewritten it as treason before returning it for him to punish. The mercy command did not absolve Kaedric. It made the punishment worse. The silver thread held the last line against the sealed council doors, and the night-glass hall seemed to shrink around it. The original report had carried Kaedric's own order to spare the Western Pax. Then the council had rewritten that mercy into treason and returned it to him wearing the shape of law. He had signed the punishment after that. His wolf had been blinded before the report reached him, but his hand had still sealed the sentence. Isabet heard the change in the court before anyone spoke. Fear had a different sound from outrage. Outrage rose hot and careless. Fear folded inward, protecting names, positions, doors, documents. The nobles were not thinking about the punished Western Pax. They were thinking about every judgment that might now have a hidden first version. She remained on her knees, her burned face lifted toward a world she still could not see. The brand across her eyes was brighter now, but brightness meant nothing to her. It was heat. It was pressure. It was the narrow place where Varok's broken judgment kept pushing through her wound. Her blindness had not become power. It had become a place the court's lie could not fully occupy. Varok stood behind Kaedric, still half-bound in silver script. The spectral wolf's head was turned toward the council doors, but whenever he tried to follow the thread deeper, the writing over his eyes tightened and dragged his sight back through Isabet's brand. His accusation had grown stronger, his freedom had not. Maelra's voice cut through the silence. A mercy command sent during battlefield uncertainty is not final law until council sight confirms it. Kaedric turned toward her slowly. It bore my seal. It bore your first seal, Maelra said. First orders issued under incomplete sight must be reviewed. That is why the court exists. Isabet's fingers pressed into the stone. First orders, first sight, first mercy. Every time the court feared the first truth, it invented a second one and called it stability. Kaedric's voice lowered. You returned treason to me, where mercy had left. We returned a governable report, Maelra said. The Western Pax were divided. Rival alphas waited for weakness. If your mercy had reached them unaltered, they could have claimed your grief, overrode discipline. My grief, he repeated. Your wolf's compromised instinct, Varok growled. The sound moved through Isabet's brand so sharply that she nearly fell forward. The soft cord around her wrists cut into her skin as she caught herself. Kaedric took one step. Isabet heard it and forced out, "Do not." He stopped. The silence after that was painful. He had not touched her. He had not commanded the brand closed. But the fact that she had to stop him at all remained between them. Protection still became dangerous when it came from a throne trained to override pain for order. What do you need? He asked. Her breath shook. Less of you. The court went still. Kaedric accepted it without defense. Slowly, deliberately, he drew his alpha presence back. The air changed. The pressure of him retreated from the moon circle, not completely, but enough that the brand stopped flaring against his authority. Varok's growl quieted into a low, broken rumble. Isabet swallowed against the burn. Read the first seal, she whispered. Maelra's answer came at once. First seal records. Our crown protected. Isabet turned her face toward her voice. You protected his seal by replacing it. The silver thread answered before Maelra could. Royal Mercy Command entered. Wolf judgment present. Council sight challenged. Treason correction applied. Alpha sentence returned. The words moved through the hall like frost over water. Kaedric did not speak for several breaths. When he did, his voice was not loud, but it reached every pillar. If I judged through their sight, then I still gave their lies my sentence. If I signed what they returned, then my hand made their correction bleed. Isabet did not comfort him. She could not afford to. The brand had begun to tremble at the edges, and pain was turning her thoughts thin. She held on to the sound of the silver thread, to the scrape of Maelra's robe to Varok's wounded breathing behind the king. Those were the only shapes she had. Maelra stepped closer to the council doors. Your Majesty, a king who unravels wartime site records in public invites every punished house to challenge the throne. You will not restore justice by making your crown contestable. Kaedric's reply was colder than before. A crown built on altered site is already contestable. The silver thread struck the doors again. This time the moon iron did not merely glow, it rang. A sound emerged from behind it, not a full council memory, not every hidden voice, only one echo from the chamber at the moment the report was corrected. Isabet heard parchment being scraped, a breath held too close, a messenger trying not to groan. Then a voice muffled by old sealing magic. The king's wolf will resist this correction. Another voice answered low and official. Then blind the wolf before the report reaches the throne. Varok lunged. The silver script snapped tight. Isabet screamed. Kaedric moved, then stopped himself so hard his boots scraped stone. His hands were shaking at his sides, not with weakness, but with the violence of holding back everything his throne had taught him to use. Maelra lifted the crescent wand. The brand is failing. Close it now or she will die inside the passage. Isabet's breath broke. For one moment she wanted the brand closed. She wanted darkness without fire, silence without court pain, that did not have to prove anything to anyone. Then the silver thread brushed the sealed doors again, and beneath the council echo came the faintest sound of the Western messenger still breathing. Alive, waiting, used. Isabet pressed her bound hands against the stone and lifted her burned face. Read why he had to die after. The false sight silver opened one final line. The Western messenger was killed only after Kaedric signed the corrected punishment, because a living witness could still name the mercy command the council had erased. The messenger's death did not close the report. It fastened it. The false sight silver held the final line against the sealed council doors, and the night glass halls seemed to understand the shape of the crime at last. A living witness could have named the mercy command. A dead messenger could be written into silence. The council had not corrected a report and then mourned its bearer. It had kept him alive until Kaedric's sentence made the correction useful, then killed the only mouth that could have undone it. Isabet remained on her knees, shaking beneath the open brand. The burn across her eyes had become a second kind of sight for everyone except her. Nobles stared at the silver-white crescent on her face as if truth itself were pouring from it. But Isabet still knew only darkness, heat, stone breath, and the terrible weight of Varok's partial judgment pressing through her wound. Her blindness had not become a miracle. It had become a door the court could not fully shut without admitting what had passed through it. Kaedric's voice came from close to the moon circle now, but not inside it. He had kept his distance because she had asked for less of him. Who killed the messenger? He asked. Maelra answered before the silver could. Messenger deaths under wartime detention are council sealed. Their causes cannot be dragged into public ritual through a false prophet's brand. Isabet laughed softly. It was not humor. It was the sound of pain finding a sharp edge. You still call me false after your silver has spent the night reading everyone but me. The brand flared. Maelra's breath tightened. Kaedric said nothing, and for once, his silence did not abandon her. It made room. Isabet lowered her burned face toward the floor. Read the death seal. The silver thread trembled against the council doors. Varok's spectral body shifted behind Kaedric, but the script around his eyes pulled tight again. He could follow judgment to the edge of the death record. He could not break the record open alone. His sight had become a blade with half its edge buried. The false sight silver answered slowly. Messenger detained alive. Corrected report returned. Alpha sentence sealed. Death witness removed. Cause rewritten. Kaedric's breath cut short. Cause rewritten, he said. Maelra lifted her chin. Death causes are often simplified after wartime detention. The kingdom cannot preserve every battlefield complication in royal record. Was he killed by order? By necessity. The word struck Isabet like cold water. Necessity. Custody. Correction. Protection. The court had many names for the same hand. Read the cause before rewriting, Isabet whispered. Maelra stepped forward. Enough. Kaedric's voice stopped her. Stand still. This time, the command carried no heat into the moon circle. It was aimed at Maelra alone, and the hall felt the difference. Isabet felt it too. The brand did not flare against him. Varok's growl lowered, not healed, but less strained. The silver thread opened another narrow line. Original cause entered, throat uncut, heart unpierced, breath withheld under moon iron oath, witness voice preserved in last exhale. The hall went silent. Isabet heard one counselor whisper a prayer too late. Kaedric's voice changed. They smothered him under oath silver. Maelra's reply was smooth but thinner. Moon iron detention can restrict dangerous speech. Until death. If speech carries treason, if speech carries mercy, Isabet said. The brand burned hotter at the word. For a moment the silver passage widened and Varok saw through it more sharply. Isabet felt his judgment like a black river behind her skull. He was not free, but he was closer to what he had been. Not sight restored. Not yet. Recognition sharpened, and with it came pain. The silver thread left the council doors and slipped across the floor toward the scribe's table. Not toward Maelra. Not toward Kaedric. Toward the record. A black-bound report lay there among the court documents carried into the hall for Isabet's trial. The Western Battle Report. The same report she had claimed smelled of dead ink and traitor hands. The court had brought it to prove her fraud. Now the silver had found it. Maelra turned sharply. Remove the report. No one moved fast enough. The thread struck the black cover. False sight silver read the page beneath the seal. Corrected report retained. Original breath residue detected. Last witness voice trapped under ink. Blind prophetess contact recorded. Isabet went very still. Blind prophetess contact. Kaedric heard it too. When did she touch the report? Maelra's voice cooled. The accused was brought near several records during questioning. No, Isabet whispered. Memory returned with the smell of dust and cold wax. 3 nights earlier, before they dragged her into the lower shrine cell, a council guard had pressed a sealed document into her bound hands and asked if her visions could read ink. She had felt the report breathe once beneath her fingertips. Not like paper, like a dying throat trying to form one last warning. That was when she had said the messenger did not die on the road. That was when Maelra had ordered her marked false. The silver read. Last exhale reached blind witness. Original report contested. False sight trial ordered. Branding required to discredit contact. Kaedric turned toward Maelra. You knew she had touched the last witness. Maelra did not deny it. A blind woman claiming to hear dead ink can destabilize royal record. Isabet's voice was barely more than breath. Because the record was alive enough to contradict you. The brand flared silver white. Varok's partial sight fixed on the black report. The last exhale under the ink began to stir, not fully released, only pressing upward as if a dead messenger's final breath had waited for someone who lived in darkness to hear what sighted courts refused to read. Kaedric stepped toward the report. Maelra lifted the crescent wand again. If you open that breath in public, Majesty, the Western punishment becomes unlawful. Kaedric looked at the report, then at Isabet kneeling in the circle. His face hardened not with innocence but with decision. Then let it become unlawful. The last witness breath opened beneath the ink, and the dead messenger's final words were not a plea for his life. They were Isabet's name. The dead did not speak her name like worship. They spoke it like evidence. The sound rose from beneath the black-bound Western report in a thin breath of silver-white light, fragile and terrible as frost forming over a wound. Isabet remained on her knees in the moon circle, blind beneath the burning crescent brand, but every head in the night-glass hall turned toward her as if the dead messenger had placed a hand on her shoulder. He had not. The only thing touching her was pain. The brand across her eyes burned harder when her name entered the record. Varok's partial sight pressed through the wound, narrow and straining, still caught in the silver script that bound his eyes. The last witness breath did not free him. It did not heal Isabet. It only opened another seam in the false report and made the court listen to a voice it had buried under ink. Kaedric stood beside the scribe's table, one hand hovering over the black report without touching it. Why did he know her name, he asked. Maelra Sen's answer came cold. A dying prisoner, may name anyone. Death loosens sense. Isabet lifted her burned face. Then let the breath read, why. Maelra turned sharply. Dead breath has no standing when carried through condemned sight. The brand flared at condemned. Isabet's mouth tightened. You have used that word all night, High Visioner. It has not closed anything yet. A few nobles shifted. Not in support. Not yet. But the court had begun to hear the pattern in Maelra's defenses. Condemned brand borrowed sight, sealed voices, wartime law, dead breath. Every time a record turned against her, she named the witness unfit before the witness could finish speaking. Kaedric noticed it too. Read why, he said. The brand resisted his command. Isabet gasped, shoulders folding, as the old seal tried to drag Varok's sight back through her wound. Kaedric stopped speaking at once, and the pressure eased by a fraction. She understood before he did. Not by order, she breathed. By last contact. Kaedric stepped back from the report. The silver-white breath under the ink trembled, then turned toward Isabet, not as sight, not as blessing, but as memory following the last person who had heard it. The false sight silver read. Last witness breath retained. Blind contact confirmed. Name delivered before discrediting. False sight trial prepared. Isabet's hands curled against the stone. Name delivered before discrediting. The messenger had not named her because she was powerful. He had named her because he had already tried to reach her, because the court had known the dying breath, had found a blind listener, because Maelra had not branded Isabet to test a fraud. She had branded her to destroy the only living contact the dead report still recognized. Kaedric's voice grew rough. You knew the messenger reached her. Maelra held her chin high. The accused claimed impossible contact with sealed ink. Under court-site law, such a claim must be tested before it infects royal record. Infects, Isabet whispered. The word hurt differently than the brand. For 7 years they had used her blindness when it helped them. They led grieving mothers to her cell and asked whether lost sons had crossed rivers. They brought broken knives, torn cloaks, blood-stiff letters, and asked what she heard from objects sighted people had failed to understand. When the answers served noble houses, they called her sensitive. When the answer threatened the royal record, they called her infection. The last witness breath stirred again beneath the report. Varok growled low behind Kaedric. The silver script over the wolf's eyes tightened, but one broken band loosened near his right eye. Through Isabet's brand, his judgment fixed on the old ink, not fully restored, not free, but clearer than before. The breath read again. Dead ink resisted alteration. Blind witness heard original voice. Royal wolf sight linked through silence. Twin sight passage indicated. The court went very still. Maelra's face changed before she controlled it. Kaedric turned toward her. Twin sight. The word was older than the hall. Isabet felt it land in the room heavy with things no one had taught her, because no one had ever expected a lower shrine blind girl to stand before the throne with a royal wolf looking through her wound. Maelra spoke quickly. An extinct classification. Unreliable. Often confused with possession or grief hearing. Not extinct, Isabet said. She did not know why she said it until the words left her. Maybe because the brand knew. Maybe because the dead breath knew. Maybe because she had lived her whole life in a darkness that never belonged only to her. Maelra's voice sharpened. Do not claim what you do not understand. Isabet's burned mouth trembled. I am not claiming it. Your silver is. The brand answered. Twin sight passage contested. Oracle standing unconfirmed. Royal wolf judgment partially linked. Full restoration blocked by council seal. Not chosen. Not crowned. Not healed. Contested. Unconfirmed. Blocked. The words mattered. They kept the miracle from becoming a lie. Isabet was not suddenly a sacred bride from noble legend. She was still kneeling, still bound, still blind, still in pain. But the darkness the court had punished was not empty. It was a passage no false sight silver could burn into fraud. Kaedric looked at her for a long moment. There was awe in his silence now, but not the soft kind. Fear came with it. Guilt, too. And something else he had no right to speak yet. I let them mark the only person my wolf could still reach, he said. Isabet did not answer. The truth did not need her tenderness to survive. Maelra lifted the crescent wand toward the black report. The classification is incomplete. The ritual must be sealed until the council reviews whether this woman is an oracle, a vessel, or a threat. Isabet raised her head, then read what blocks the restoration. The silver-white breath pulled from the report toward the sealed council doors again. Varok strained. The brand burned so hard Isabet nearly collapsed, but she held herself upright on trembling arms. The falsite silver opened one final line. The council's seal did not only blind Varok from seeing the false report, it was made to kill any twin sight passage that helped him see without them. The council's seal had not been made only to blind Varok. It had been made to make sure he could never borrow sight from anyone the court did not control. The line burned across the night-glass hall in silver-white fire, and for one breath, no one seemed to understand why Isabet suddenly folded forward with both hands flat against the stone. Then the brand across her eyes darkened at the edges. The crescent mark did not close. It tightened. Varok's growl broke through her like thunder trapped under ice. Kaedric moved before thought could become command, then stopped himself so violently that the air around him shook. Every instinct in him wanted to cross the moon circle, tear the silver from her skin and break the council doors with his bare hands. But the brand had already proven what force could do. Royal pressure could become another chain if it entered the wrong seam. Isabet heard him stop. That mattered. It did not save her. Maelra lifted the crescent wand. The passage has been identified as lethal instability. Under court-site law, it must be sealed. No, Kaedric said. Maelra turned to him. Majesty, the silver has named the danger itself. The seal kills twin-sight passages because such passages allow royal wolf judgment to bypass lawful interpretation. Bypass lies, Isabet whispered. The brand flared. Pain took the rest of her breath. Varok's partial sight pressed harder through her wound, not wider, not free, but desperate now. The silver script around his eyes had changed. Its broken rings no longer simply held him blind. They reached toward Isabet's brand, like hooks, searching for the passage itself. Kaedric saw enough to understand. It is trying to close through her. Maelra's voice remained steady. It is correcting an unlawful link. It is killing her. It is preserving the throne from uncontrolled wolf sight. Isabet's fingers curled against the stone. There it was, not prophecy, not fraud, not infection. Control. The court had not feared that Varok would see through her because she was false. They feared he would see without them. The last witness breath under the black report stirred again, thin and fading. The dead messenger's voice had opened twin sight passage, but the council seal was already turning against the opening. If it closed now, the record would remain contested. Varok would remain half-blinded, and Isabet would become another failed anomaly the court could bury under a kinder word. Kaedric's voice came low. How do we stop it? Isabet almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because he had finally asked instead of ordered, and the question arrived while her body was already paying the price for his delay. She forced sound through her teeth. Do not stop the brand. His breath caught. Then what read the kill stitch? Maelra went still. That silence told Isabet she had found the next seam. A seal strong enough to kill a passage had a point where killing began, not the whole conspiracy. Not every council name. One stitch, one function, one instruction written into silver script so deep that even Varok's judgment had only touched its edge. Kaedric turned toward Maelra. What is a kill stitch? A dangerous term used by untrained shrine frauds. Then why did you stop breathing when she said it? Maelra's hand tightened around the wand. The brand burned hotter. Isabet bowed over the stone, but she did not pull her face away from the passage. Read what kills the passage. The false sight silver resisted. Varok strained. The court watched a blind woman kneel under the weight of a royal wolf's contested judgment, and no one laughed now. They had laughed when the silver was meant to prove she had stolen sight. They did not laugh when it proved she had none to steal, and still became the only opening truth could use. The silver answered. Twin sight passage detected. Unauthorized witness contact confirmed. Royal wolf judgment, bypassing council sight. Kill stitch awakened. The crescent brand turned sharp as a blade. Isabet screamed. Kaedric stepped forward one half step, then stopped at the edge again, fists shaking. His restraint was no longer elegant. It looked brutal. It looked like a king learning that not every protection could arrive as power. Maelra spoke over Isabet's pain. The passage is unauthorized. The seal functions as designed. Kaedric's eyes turned cold. Who authorized the kill stitch? Maelra did not answer. The black report did. The last witness breath rose from beneath the ink and joined the silver thread still stretched toward the council doors. The two lights twisted together, dead breath and false sight silver. Not enough to free Varok, not enough to heal Isabet, but enough to read one hidden order. Kill stitch authorized. Council site preservation entered. Twin site witnesses to be silenced. Branding recommended if contact survives. Isabet understood then why the court had not simply killed her in the lower shrine. They had needed her branded. They had needed false sight silver before the twin sight passage could be named. If she died after being condemned as false, no one would ask why a royal wolf had tried to see through her darkness. Kaedric understood it too. They planned this trial before she stood in the hall. Maelra's expression did not break. The court prepared for contamination. You prepared her death. We prepared the realm against an uncontrolled oracle classification. Isabet lifted her head by inches. I am not controlled, she whispered. The brand flared silver white. Not with victory, with warning. The kill stitch tightened again, and this time Varok's spectral body staggered. The partial sight through her wound began to narrow. The passage was being strangled from both sides. Kaedric reached for the black wolf clasp at his throat. Maelra's eyes sharpened. Majesty, do not expose your blood to an unauthorized passage. He tore the clasp free. A drop of blood welled where the silver pin had cut his palm. Isabet heard the court inhale. Kaedric did not enter the circle. He knelt at its edge and pressed his bleeding palm to the outer silver line. Not on her, not over her, beside her. My wolf's judgment was taken through my throne, he said. Let my blood contest the seal, not her body alone. The circle shook. The brand across Isabet's eyes cooled by the smallest fraction. Not healed, shared. Varok's growl deepened, and one band of silver script cracked open over his right eye. The false sight silver read one final line. The kill stitch could not close while the blinded Alpha King publicly contested the council's right to own his wolf's judgment. The circle accepted Kaedric's blood before the court could forbid it. The outer silver line of the moon circle brightened beneath his palm, not red, not gold, but a hard moon white that made every wolf in the nightglass hall lower its head. Kaedric stayed on one knee outside the circle, careful not to cross into Isabet's wound, careful not to make his strength another chain around her pain. His hand bled against the old ritual line, and for the first time that night, the false sight silver had to read the king as contact, not command. Isabet felt the brand cool by one thin breath. Only one. It still burned across her eyes. Her world remained dark. Varok's judgment still pressed through the passage in her wound, but the weight no longer crushed her alone. Kaedric had not saved her by force. He had placed himself into the record beside the harm and made the court's ownership contestable. Maelra understood the danger immediately. Withdraw your blood, Majesty, she said. If the Alpha Line contests court-site custody in public, every sealed judgment under wartime restriction may be challenged. Kaedric did not move his hand. Good. The word carried through the hall like a door opening. Maelra's face tightened. A kingdom cannot survive if every sentence becomes a wound to reopen. Isabet lifted her burned face. A kingdom cannot survive if wounds are the only reason sentences stay closed. The brand flared. Varok growled behind Kaedric deeper, now less broken. One band of silver script cracked over his right eye, then another. The wolf was not free, not whole, but his judgment had found more than accusation. It had found public challenge through the king's blood and Isabet's darkness together. The kill stitch writhed against the opening. The false sight silver read. Alpha blood entered. Council ownership contested. Twin sight passage still active. Kill stitch authority challenged. Maelra lifted the crescent wand toward Isabet's face. Kaedric's voice went cold. If you touch her again, you will answer before every packhouse here. I answer to court-site law. No, he said. You hid behind it. Maelra did not confess. She did not beg. Her spine remained straight, her silver robes unstained, except where false sight droplets had dried on her fingers. I preserved judgment when your wolf became vulnerable. I preserved the throne when border panic, dead messengers, and unauthorized oracle contact threatened to tear Greymere apart. You preserved your access to my blindness, Kaedric said. Isabet heard the silence that followed. It did not forgive him. It made him stand inside the truth. His wolf had been blinded. His reports had been changed. His mercy command had been erased. But his throne had punished the Western Pax. His silence had burned Isabet. His authority had given the court something to wear while it lied. The brand pulsed again, and Isabet nearly fell. Kaedric's hand flexed against the circle, but he did not reach for her. What does it need? He asked. Isabet breathed through the pain. The first question. What question? She turned her face toward Maelra's silver bowl, the one the ritual was made to answer before it found Varok. False sight silver had been brought to punish stolen vision. It had never finished. Isabet pressed her bound hands against the stone and whispered, "Read what sight I stole." The hall froze. Maelra's breath caught softly. The brand across Isabet's eyes opened one last time, not wider, not kinder, only deeper into the original purpose of the punishment. The false sight silver searched her darkness again. It searched for stolen visions, forged prophecy, borrowed, noble sight, grief magic, possession, false oracle flame. It found none. The silver read, no stolen sight found, honest darkness retained, blind witness contact verified, twin sight oracle, standing confirmed. Condemned brand, invalid. The soft white cord around Isabet's wrists loosened and fell to the floor. Not because she had been healed, because the judgment against her had failed. The court did not cheer. It had no right to. Wolves bowed their heads not to a queen, not to a chosen bride, but to a witness whose pain had forced royal judgment back into the room. Varok's right eye opened fully through the broken script. His left remained chained. That mattered. Truth had begun. It had not finished. The spectral wolf lowered his great head toward Isabet, not in possession, not in claim, but in acknowledgement. The passage between them dimmed until the burning brand became a silver crescent scar across her eyes, still painful, still tender, but no longer eating through her skin. Isabet saw nothing. Then Varok withdrew his sight from her wound. Darkness returned to her alone. For one moment the loss nearly broke her. Not because she had ever seen for herself, but because the court went silent in a way that made her feel the shape of all the light she still did not possess. Kaedric spoke from the edge of the circle. Isabet Rook. She turned toward his voice. He rose slowly, blood still on his palm. Before this court I name you no fraud, no condemned vessel, no stolen sight witch. You are twin sight oracle of Greymere, and no council voice will carry judgment over your darkness again. Maelra stepped back. Majesty, the classification is unverified by full temple measure. Kaedric looked toward the sealed council doors. Then the temple will measure the council first. The doors shuddered under the silver thread. He turned to the guards. High Visioner Maelra Sen is to be removed from ritual authority. Preserve her wand, the false sight bowl, the Western battle report, and every court site restriction sealed since Varok was blinded. Maelra's voice sharpened. You will split the realm. No, Kaedric said. I will find where it was already split. The guards took her crescent wand. Maelra did not plead as they led her away. She looked at Isabet once, not with hatred alone, but with the fury of a woman watching a controlled system become readable through the very wound she had made. When the hall emptied around fear and record, Kaedric came no closer than the circle's edge. Isabet, he said quietly, I cannot undo that. I let them burn you. No, I cannot ask you to carry my wolf again. No, she said. His breath changed, but he accepted it. That mattered more than any vow spoken too early. Isabet pushed herself slowly to her feet. She nearly fell, and this time Kaedric did not catch her. He let her stand on her own, while the whole court watched the woman they had branded false remain upright without their permission. Only when she steadied did he bow his head, not as alpha to oracle, As the king whose judgment had failed before the blind woman he had failed to hear, "What do you ask of me?" he said. Isabet touched the silver scar across her eyes. "Do not make my pain your redemption." His voice came rough. "Then what? Make your throne. Answer." Behind him, Varok's one unsealed eye glowed silver black in the darkness. Kaedric lowered himself to one knee before the moon circle. The court broke into whispers, but he did not rise. "I will." Isabet did not forgive him, but she heard the first honest judgment return to the wolf beside him. Above the night-glass hall, the silver ceiling darkened from polished moonlight into deep winter sky. Somewhere beyond the sealed council doors, hidden records began to stir. The western pacts were not restored. The dead messenger did not breathe again. Varok was not fully free. Isabet remained blind. But the false brand had failed to make her a lie. And in Graymere, for the first time in years, the Alpha King's wolf could see enough to know where the next truth waited.